All right, so this is where we left off. Sorry, it was cut short. We don't have much more left. All right, so we talked about, sorry, mobility, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and how they're very mobile killers. Killed in different locations. They live in one location. I'm sorry, stable killer. I'm sorry. Going crazy. So these are stable killers where they live in the area basically where they're killing. Then you have your transient killer, which travels. They don't stay in one spot. They maybe spend a few months in one spot, move to another place. So again, very tough to find. They very rarely stay in more than one place for more than a few weeks. Kills are more spread out this way. Harder for law enforcement in different areas to make connections between these things, especially in the 60s and 70s. A little easier now, I guess. But back then, the 50s, 60s, and 70s was tougher to do to provide information to different law enforcement areas across the country. A lot of them didn't share the same networks and things. Also, these killers will dispose bodies in random locations, and a site is selected for their convenience. And then they very rarely ever return to the crime scene because again they're transient. They travel a lot. They want to find new hunting grounds, confuse law enforcement. So again, pretty obvious reasons. All right, so there's different types of serial killers. You have your visionaries that they claim to see things, they hear voices, psychopathic thoughts. They direct it at being another being. That somebody's telling them to do these things. So you obviously have those visionaries. They're seeing visions. Then you have your missionary type of serial killers, where they feel like they need to eradicate a certain group. They're not psychotic. So sometimes maybe why you might see a fixation on maybe certain types of victims. You might see patterns in them. Um, so like for instance, if you've seen Dexter before, on Netflix or whatever. Maybe put in this category. He was a serial killer. He had urges to kill, but he focused on the bad people. That's how he would justify his killing. He's killing people that have done awful things in their life and have gotten away with it. Then you have your hedonistic murders that seek thrill and they drive their pleasure from killing. These are people who have like the fantasies about killing and they're living out their fantasies through their murders. And then you have your power control type as well, that they get their urge to just dominate their victim. They get a thrill over their showcasing their power. The power of life and death too is all in their hands. They seek pleasure in that. So what is a serial killer? What characteristics come to mind? So here's a misconception. Serial killers are the same as mass murderers. Serial killers kill several people over a series of days, weeks, months. But again, that's not true. That's a misconception. There's an active period and a cooling off period, as we said. Mass murders kill a number of people within a few hours. Since we talk about like Columbine, an example of that, there's a short outburst. There's no cooling off period with mass murder. So that's a misconception. That's not the same. Serial killers are complete losers who cannot function normally in society. Again, that's not true. Ted Bundy was seen as very charming. Um, Again, you got to build trust with ladies, or whoever your victim is. So these types of cases, you don't see like forced entry. Obviously, they build trust with their victims. It's more common actually for them to live a normal life than it is for not. So some different characteristics here. Some motives that are in the killings are sex. It could be power, manipulation, or some type of control. They have the control to choose the location and choose the manner in which they commit the crime. So that plays a major role in that. White males overwhelmingly, 90% of serial killers are males, are white. And then the age group typically is in that 25 to 35 range is typically what you'll find in the serial killer profile. Over 85% of the serial killers come from the United States, so that's kind of an interesting stat, I think, in terms of the worldwide serial killers out there. And it's some kind of important to the McDonald triad, something that's also through different studies have linked the that have linked serial killers. That's basically these three things: bedwetting after the age of 12. 60% of serial killers have fit in that category. Setting fires at an early age, destructing things, and killing small animals are really the three big things. They call it the McDonald triad. Those two things are very big precursors into serial killers. Many of them have experienced some kind of trauma as a kid, emotional, physical. Um, like a defining moment essentially that happened to them, an awful moment that haunts them. Um, so it's very common. And then obviously, as I said, they're interested in sadistic activity, setting fires and killing animals. Again, very common theme. Also, common characteristics of their victims, who they choose. Victims are usually typically chosen from the same group. So you might find prostitutes, for instance, might be victims amongst some certain serial killers. Hitchhikers, women, children. So typically you see a pattern in terms of that. Victims usually have similar attributes, so it could be age, a similar age pattern. It could be race, residence in a certain location where they live, as well as gender as well, are typically are patterns that you typically see. A lot of these individuals will also develop sex murder fantasies in their teenage years. So the reason for them, the urge to keep killing, because maybe they might be disappointed in the act, and they need to reenact to perfect that, and an urge that drives them. Typically, there's no prior contact or hatred for the victim. Again, more times than not, but there are some cases where some develop and build relationships with these ladies that could last weeks or months before the killing. And these victims might be symbolic in some way or shape or form amongst the serial killer. So why do people become serial killers? Again, as we already kind of alluded to, a lot of the explanation is done to the brain. There's brain defects and injuries that have been an important link to this violent behavior. Damage to the frontal lobe, the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. This area of the brain is responsible for setting your goals and your planning and your judgment and your attention and your personality and your emotions. And when there's damage to that frontal lobe, it causes everything to kind of go out of whack, and it makes your emotions and you don't think rationally at times. So they've seen patterns in that as well. All right, so sociopaths typically are self-centered, manipulative, emotionally shallow. They can't show remorse or empathy for their actions. There's very rock solid. They don't show a lot of remorse for what they do or emotion. As I said before, a lot of it's fantasy in terms of what what drives them. They have detailed fantasies about their victims and how they're going to go about killing. So a lot of it, there are things that helps psychiatrists develop profiles for these killers. And obviously, some of them also take trophies, keep souvenirs as well. So criminals take money, jewels, and electronics, whereas serial killers take objects of no value. Could be clothes, driver's license, body parts. So there's no value to that. So they see it more of a trophy. All right, so that's it as far as the lectures go. All this should be in your guided notes. You guys can proceed to your next part of the thing.